Hello, my name is Matthew Galluzzo. I'm a federal criminal defense attorney here in New York City. I'm also a former Manhattan prosecutor, and today we're going to talk just a little bit about our initial impressions of the Eric Adams indictment. That's the indictment of the New York City mayor. It was just unsealed today. It's 57 pages long. It's quite an interesting read. I encourage you to look it up on the internet, download it, and read it for yourself. But I'm just going to spend a few minutes here just discussing some of the basics about what this indictment is and what it means and what perhaps we may be able to look forward to in the future with respect to this case. So, Mr. Adams has been indicted by a federal grand jury in the Southern District of New York, that's here in Manhattan. And he's being accused basically of a number of crimes related to illegal political fundraising and also bribery as a public official. And it is alleged that back in 2014, when he first became the Brooklyn borough president, that he started accepting bribes and gifts from foreign nationals and other people trying to influence him or gain his favor. And then when he kicked off his campaign for mayor officially in 2018, that's when his criminal conduct allegedly really escalated. And this is the culmination of a lot of rumors and investigations that we've been aware of for some time with respect to Mr. Adams. And it's very descriptive. This indictment is 57 pages long, and it's quite vivid in its account of how Mr. Adams went about allegedly committing these crimes. I'm not going to be able to go through it page by page or line by line. You'll have to do that for yourself, but I'm going to summarize it just generally. So basically what Mr. Adams is alleged to have done is to have knowingly accepted campaign contributions when he was running for mayor that would have been illegal under federal law and also under some New York City rules. For example, it's illegal for a foreign national to give a political contribution to somebody like Mr. Adams when he was running for mayor. It would also have been, there's also limits, it's $2,000 for how much an individual can give to somebody who's running for office as well. There's also limitations on corporate donations for a corporation to give a donation to a candidate. And, it's alleged here really on the first page and throughout this indictment that the way that they got around all these federal rules was that Mr. Adams allegedly and his staff encouraged people who wanted to give him more money or people who were foreign nationals and couldn't give him money to use straw donors. Now, it is what it sounds like. Basically, that involves somebody who wants to give, say, $10,000 to a candidate but can only give $2,000. Well, you pay 5 people who can give donations to give those donations on your behalf. It's almost like a money laundering operation. But basically, you're just using almost like shell corporations to give donations, except you're using people and asking them to make the donation on your behalf, perhaps paying them to make the donation on your behalf. And supposedly he did this a lot over the course of several years. And those donations, one of the interesting things about it is that New York City has a program whereby they will give up to $8 to a candidate for every $1 that is privately given to the candidate. Basically, New York City will fund campaigns or match, it's really called a matching public funds program. Well, they will match some of their donations in order to encourage small donors to make donations and also to try and keep corporate money out of politics. And so the effect of that is that if there are illegal donations being given through these straw men, say for example, New York City is then multiplying that by a factor of 8 because they are giving $8 for every one that's being donated, really a factor of 9, in order to, and so you're getting more money, you're tricking the New York City system into giving you more campaign money by accepting illegal money in the first place. So the New York City taxpayers are also hurt by this because he's getting taxpayer-funded campaign contributions based upon illegal contributions from other sources. So the first count of the indictment is a conspiracy to commit a number of these crimes. It's a conspiracy to commit wire fraud. It's a conspiracy to solicit foreign donations. It's also a conspiracy to engage in bribery. And then there's counts for each of those specific crimes. So the agreement to make these crimes is count 1. Okay, so an agreement to work with other people to commit crimes is usually count 1 in a conspiracy indictment in federal court. And then all the actual crimes themselves are then separate counts in the indictment. So that's typical. It's what we see here as well. It's basically alleged that he had a very long-standing relationship with people from Turkey, maybe even with the Turkish government, with Turkish Airlines and other Turkish corporations. The Turkish University is alleged here. That Mr. Adams allegedly was flying all over the world many times a year on Turkish Airlines at either for free or at greatly discounted rates. He was getting upgraded to business class after paying for coach all the time. And as a public official, he's supposed to be disclosing all the travel that people are paying for him to do. Allegedly, he was not doing that. But also just the fact that he's getting these free flights, I mean, that would be in some ways a contribution or perhaps a payment with an expectation of some sort of favor being granted to the Turkish government. Now, this supposedly went on for a very long time, not only donations through straw people, not only these flights on Turkish Airlines, but also hotels in Turkey and other places that provided for by supposedly these Turkish people who were interested in gaining his favor. And that all came to a head when the Turkish consulate was trying to get approval from the FDNY, that's the fire department here in New York, for their Turkish consulate building, this new Turkish consulate building. They were apparently having some trouble getting it up to code as far as the fire safety people at the FDNY were concerned. And they were blocking a certificate of occupancy that the Turkish consulate needed. They were planning on hosting the Turkish president at a soiree or some event, and they were having trouble getting fire department approval for the way their building was. And so, to make a long story short, it's alleged that after having given all these favors to Mayor Adams, the Mayor Adams then instructed the FDNY to give out the certificate of occupancy over their objections upon threats supposedly being made, and then lo and behold, the certificate that the Turkish government needed to open up its building was granted. So that was the act in exchange for all these other bribes, according to the indictment. Now, it's a very interesting indictment in that at times there appear to be communications via text message that have been preserved and saved that may not look good for Mayor Adams when he's communicating with the staff. But a lot of it does depend upon, what it seems to me that was going to depend upon the testimony of staff. It's clear that there's a few people named in this indictment. The Adams staffer is one of them. Adams employees, also named here in the indictment, were clearly cooperating with the prosecution, with the government in this investigation and this case. You can expect these people have cut deals in some way with the prosecution to avoid prosecution of themselves or any other types of penalties. And so their testimony at trial is going to be critical to closing this deal for the prosecution. They are cooperating witnesses, sometimes called snitches or rats, but obviously there are a lot of conversations that are described in this indictment that are not through text message, that are only heard by the mayor, allegedly, and these employees or staffers. And so it's going to be up to those witnesses to convince a jury that Mr. Adams actually had these conversations, actually had knowledge of all this illegal activity. And that's usually how these defenses work out in a case like this. Whenever you're talking about a CEO, or if you're talking about Trump, like he just had in his recent trial here in Manhattan, whenever their employees are engaged in illegal conduct, and Adams may argue that all this straw man donation, all these other things, all these failures to report and disclose, these are all the fault of his employees, and he didn't know anything about it. He thought things were being reported, he thought things were being done correctly, but his employees were the ones who felt like they could skirt the rules. That's what he's going to defend him. That's what he's going to say. But then the question becomes, can they prove that Mr. Adams was aware of it, supported it, or even directed it? And a defense attorney is going to argue that these staffers did it on their own and that Adams was unaware of it. But if there are text messages that are terribly incriminating, or if these witnesses are very credible on the stand about the conversation they had with Mr. Adams, then I think he's going to be in a lot of trouble. At the end of the day, most criminal defendants in federal court do get convicted. It's well in the high 98, 97 percentile type range. People ultimately get convicted by trial or plea. I would not be surprised in this case if the federal prosecutors have some discussions with Mr. Adams and his counsel about perhaps getting a more favorable plea deal if he agrees to resign from office. I think that's kind of what happens in a lot of these political appointees or elected person cases. Usually first priority is get that person out of the office, and then we'll talk about, talk about a plea deal after that. But, from what he's been saying so far, it seems like he wants his trial. A lot of guys say that at the beginning, and then they change their mind after they've had a chance to look at all the evidence. But, very well could be a trial here. He may be thinking he's fighting for his legacy, his political life. Certainly, this is not a case where jail is mandatory, but with this much money at stake and the fact that it also really harms the public trust, this kind of skirting of these campaign rules, is really harmful to the public. It undermines their confidence in the system and the fairness of the system. And so I think if he were to get convicted, he'd go to jail. Let's put it that way. He doesn't have to. It's not mandatory. But I think if you're a judge and someone goes to trial and loses like this, that he's going to spend a few years potentially behind bars on account of the behavior that's alleged in this indictment. Now, is he going to win or lose? It's a little too early for me to say with much confidence. But I think the case could be very strong. I think there's going to be straw men called as witnesses. There's going to be a lot of staff of Mayor Adams called. They have all these phones. They have all these computers. And at the end of the day, all of his trips, he obviously took them and did not disclose them. That's extremely suspicious. He could say that that was just a failure to understand, but these guys know the rules. Honestly, they all do. And so if they're not disclosing it when they're supposed to, it's because they're trying to cover up the fact that they're doing it. And if they're trying to cover up the fact that they're doing it, it may be because there's something bigger than travel going on here. I mean, airplane flights are one thing, but if you're talking about, really doing favors and taking bribes for another government or another rich person abroad, that's another thing altogether. And so I think the travel is going to be really problematic to explain, just because there's no real excuse for having taken all these gift flights and not having reported them. So anyway, we'll see what happens, and check back in on my YouTube channel. I'll give some more thoughts as more of the evidence starts to emerge, as we learn more about the case. I'm happy to keep talking about it. Thanks.